On this episode of the Minuteman Initiative, we're talking precision rifle. To help us with that conversation, we get the opportunity to sit down with Chris Roberts of CR2 Shooting Solutions. Now, Chris is an absolute subject matter expert in this area. Long career in the United States Army as a sniper and a sniper instructor. Went on to inform the U.S. Army and consult for the U.S. Army on kind of the sniper program and where it needs to go and the different equipment that is needed to remain effective in that area and in that warfare arena. Other than that, he has started his own company, which is CR2 Shooting Solutions. And in that company, he does a whole lot of things, but one of the specific things he does is training and educational programs, specifically for precision shooting. So we're very thankful to sit down with him today and have him on the podcast. And really hope you enjoy this one. We learned a ton, literally mid-podcast. You can hear the wheels turning. So it was awesome to have somebody as knowledgeable as him come and sit down and talk with us. So I hope you enjoy the episode.
Jacob, how you doing?
Dude, I'm doing.
We got the pleasure of having Mr. Chris Roberts on the podcast. Me and Chris we got a little bit of history, not a ton, but we got to serve together there for. It's kind of short-lived, but it was very much in the beginning of my military career. I think I've mentioned this story on the podcast before, but there was a time where I was pretty new, so I got a lot of weight thrown on me for a lot of missions, and that's just the way it goes when you're a new Joe, dude. But
oh my God, yeah.
So I decided, me and one of my other buddies, I won't mention his name, but he was pretty new too. We were tired of carrying in them big heavy rucks, so we decided to kind of skimp on some cold weather gear, and yeah, we regretted that decision. It was January in North Carolina. He was from up north too. I'm from Alaska, obviously. So I was like, oh, we'll be all right, you know.
Oh yeah, people sleep on the South because they're like, oh, it's the South, and I'm from the North. Like it won't be that cold.
Yeah. So we get out there, and man, it was an absolute, like, the mission was just trash. Yeah, it's a trash mission. It was snowing, and I just remember freezing my tail off, and Chris just kept us warm that night. Just a little soldier cuddle action, man.
Oh yeah,
dude. I remember he was like, man, I'll be the big spoon, and I was just like, dude, bring it in, man. No fear here, man. Oh man,
dude, I'll tell you. So, well, first off, I was thinking when I just got to the office a little bit ago, I had to go grab some packages, and I was thinking about this podcast, and it got me thinking about the fact that, like, I can't believe that our history is already over a decade old.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's crazy.
And that's what freaking blows my mind is, like, how do I have this much history with people that's that old?
Yeah,
I still think of you as a little kid, man, and I know you're not, obviously.
Yeah, because I was I was like 18 or 19 during that time frame, so I was very, very new. Yeah, man. Yeah, and you just don't know the impact you have on people, because I still say to this day, like, you were probably one of the best leaders I had in the military, not going to lie. Like, you were by far my best squad leader I had while I was in, so. And, like, pretty much any leadership skills that I bring to that, I like, because, man, it was like the difference between having to work for someone and wanting to work for someone is like such a different, like, it breeded such a good culture for our squad while you were our squad leader. Like, we had the best PT scores. We were like crushing every mission, and it's because all of us wanted to work for you, man. And and that's something I really love too, man, is like, especially like PT, because I've been a big dude my entire career. Yeah. And so, I've always had that stigma where people just doubted me, and especially as a leader, and then they're like, well, how well is this guy going to be able to lead soldiers and stuff like that? And it's like, yeah, man, I'm not going to be the fastest dude in on a run, Yeah. I'm going to make it for sure, but I'm not going to be the fastest dude on the run. But, our
my soldiers, my squads, my teams were always freaking solid because, we got after it, and we did what we needed to do. And my guys liked working for me. So there was no, but there was no slack either.
No, definitely not. You got called out, and we appreciated that as well. I think everyone, obviously that squad got broken up after you left. I think you went to like CR school, and then like shortly after that, you got orders to Germany. So, it was fun while it lasted. And then a lot of those guys stayed pretty squared away after that because we kind of saw how to do it right, I guess. So
it kills me. It's great. That kills me, but it's crazy because one of the dudes, oh goodness, I can't think of his name right now. I remember he went to Ranger. He went to like every school under the sun. He was ready to be the next freaking Audie Murphy or Iron Mike. Maybe that's a better example because I don't think Audie Murphy was actually a good human being. But of course, he got a lot of freaking medals of honor. But I think if you actually look at his history, he had quite checkered history. So maybe Iron Mike's a better guy. But anyways, and then he went on to become a freaking he's a helicopter pilot now. Yeah. So what is his name?
Oh man,
he was the RTO.
He was
he was a RTO for a while at least.
I'm trying to think who it would have been.
Was it
DeMars?
DeMars, that's it.
Okay.
Sick.
Yeah, I didn't realize. Did he go to Ranger school then? He passed Ranger school?
Yeah.
Okay, good for him.
That was the thing that just cracked me up because that dude is probably the most tabbed and patched and whatever up dude, flying a helicopter right now.
Yeah, there's quite a
because I think he's like a CW3.
Yeah, there's quite a few of those guys.
Sick. He's living.
He's a jump master, airborne, air assault, ranger. God only knows what else. I can't remember if we ever sent him to sniper school or not, but pretty squared away dude.
Yeah, I don't know why. For whatever reason, a lot of the dudes from that unit turned over. They went green to gold and became helicopter pilots. So there's quite a few of them actually.
Good for them.
Yeah, they were living the good life.
Dude, they're on that first name basis.
Are they though? Because they're still in.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest right now.
Dude. Yeah, we're living the good life.
It's better on this side.
Yeah.
It's definitely better. Oh man. Well, we're kind of already treading in that territory, but Chris, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit more and maybe talk about your background and kind of where you come from and where you are now, we'll kind of start with that.
Yeah, man. So I'm originally a Michigan native, born and raised in the burbs of Detroit. Yes, I lived on 7 Mile, not 8 Mile. But, I honestly just a city kid. I grew up riding BMX, no real
Nice.
Gun background, nothing like that. When I was 13, I had opportunity to go to church camp in the summer, and they had 1 week out of each summer they had this what they called specialty week, and that was the time that the kids during that week could take like certain classes and whatever else. And I remember they had a hunter safety class that week, and I had heard that the guy who ran that he brought up his arsenal, and it was an older guy, but he had dozens and dozens of firearms, and he would bring them up there, and so when you took the hunter safety class, you could fire off his guns. And me being a 13-year-old kid, I was like, yeah, I want to shoot guns. And I remember my mom was like, what do you need a hunter safety certificate for? Like, you don't hunt, nobody in our immediate family hunts. And I was like, yeah, but I want to shoot guns. Like, it's good, of course. Yeah. And so that was my first time ever shooting a gun, is in that. And then so after that I didn't touch a firearm again until I joined the Army. And so I joined the Army about a year or so out of high school. Just didn't know what I was going to do. Had every opportunity handed to me and just didn't take them. Just because I was the kind of kid who, if I could have just sat through a lecture and then taken a test and then walked out of, and then, be done with the class, like that's the format that would have worked well for me. But making me do homework and things like that. Like I just wasn't interested. So, I scraped my way through school. And I didn't want to go to college when I got out of school, even though, it was handed to me on a silver platter. So I remember I freaking worked in a warehouse moving furniture for a while because I was a big dude and I could lift furniture pretty easily. And then I worked in a oil changing place for a little bit, and then I was like, this all sucks, and I'm not making a lot of money. And I've always been a fighter, kicked out of a couple schools and everything else. So like joining the Army sounds kind of cool. And so I had a buddy who was going to join, and he was like, hey, let's go to the Army. This is right after 9/11. Cause I graduated in 2001. And so he's like, let's join the Army and we'll freaking, go on Ranger contracts and freaking, we'll go kick ass. So I was like, yeah, I mean, that sounds awesome. And so I joined by myself because he didn't.
Oh no, he bailed on you.
And then I didn't even actually take a Ranger contract. I just took an 11X contract because I just didn't know, really what all of it meant. And then I scored so high on my ASVAB that my recruiter was like, hey, you should be doing something else. And so he wasn't encouraging me to go infantry. So I really didn't get even an infantry contract I should have got. I should have got, a Ranger contract or a SF contract or something, but I didn't. So I just went regular old ground pounder and ended up at the 101st after that. And then, I did that for, three tours overseas. And then I was about to be on my fourth tour, and my wife had joined. My wife, who I met at Hunter Safety, by the way, my wife had joined, and we had done a deployment at the same time. And now she was going psychological operations, and she had gone to Bragg. So her orders pulled me along since she was in the special operations side, and I ended up at Bragg. And initially, I wasn't airborne, so when you go to Bragg and you're not airborne, there's two things that can happen. They either send you to airborne school immediately, or they find a job that you can do at Bragg. And believe it or not, there is a few jobs you can do at Bragg as a not airborne soldier. So since I was a sniper qualified non-airborne soldier, there was actually slots within the Battlefield Surveillance Brigade. And so they belonged to Corps at the time. And they were like, yeah, we'll just send you there. You can fill that role. And they'll send you to airborne school, because that's where the LURS unit is. And so I did that. And they actually, funny story, they actually deployed the day I showed up. So my unit was going on their fourth deployment right as I left Fort Campbell. And then when I showed up to Bragg, the unit I showed up to was leaving. So they literally pretty much deployed at the exact same time. So after I got in process, all that stuff, I deployed with them. And as soon as I came back, I went to airborne school. And then what do you know? I found my way down to the 82nd with Steven here. So that's how we crossed paths. And so I did that for a little while, and then I realized the 82nd's whack, and I did not like being there. And we had an opportunity to go to Germany, so we did that. So, and that's how my instructing career started. So I went over there to teach marksmanship for a little bit, did that for a little while. Then I became a master breacher. I actually taught breaching over there for a little while. And then I came back to the force at Campbell, did that for a little bit, got another deployment with them. So that was number 5. And then when we came back from that deployment, that's when I came down to Fort Benning, initially to be a part of the Security Forces Assistance Brigade when they first stood those up. But then I finished out at sniper school. So I ran one of the instructor teams out there at sniper school until I retired. And then I actually went and I took over force modernization for snipers for the Army. So I actually ran the sniper program for the Army as far as where snipers are going in the future. So that's training, that's training, that's procurement, that's doctrine. Now, I wasn't necessarily writing all those things; it's advising them. My job was specifically to write procurement documents, but I would advise on doctrine and training as basically the highest ranking. I was a civilian at the time, but as the highest level subject matter expert for snipers, it was my job to advise the senior leaders of the Army where snipers should go in the future. So advising them on training and doctrine and things like that. So, and that kind of led me to starting CR2, where we are today.
So, I know that how do you get into that basically, or how did you get into that kind of in your Army career? Because I know that's a pretty close knit
sniper.
Yeah. Well, maybe, was it just being Bravo 4 or like sniper qualified and then being told like, hey, you're a subject matter expert, teach these guys, and did that just kind of compound into getting to where you were able to get into those contracting positions? Or
yeah, so well, yeah, my experience in the sniper community was actually a little bit weird. So I initially went to sniper school out of section. I had a friend who went, and he did really well there, and they were coming to do an MTT at Fort Campbell, and they asked for AIs. And so he is my friend now, but he was my soldier then, and he came to me and he said, hey, can I be an assistant instructor when they come to do this MTT? So I was like, yeah, absolutely. We'll get it clear through the chain of command. So then he was like, hey, I know you have always wanted to go to sniper school or something. So, if they'll clear you and you can get your stuff together, I'm sure I can freaking get you a slot, So he reached out to then. So I see that was coming to run the course at Campbell. And he was like, yeah, man, if he's got his stuff squared away, we'll put him as a walk-on, but people drop on day 0 all the time because of PT or because their packets aren't squared away or whatever else. So, I mean, chances are if his stuff's squared away, he'll get in. And so, yeah, I was literally the first walk on, and I was in the course within 5 minutes, So, and Sweet. Because he had just gone through, he helped make sure my packet was, was good to go. So that's how I ended up going to the course. And then I filled various roles throughout my career in Bravo 4 roles. From section leader, and then my instructing position when I first got to Germany was a Bravo 4 position, and then honestly, I thought my sniper career was kind of over when I left that instructing position in Germany. So that was, I don't know, 2014 timeframe. Was the last time I had picked up a long gun until I made it all the way back to sniper school as an instructor. Like I said, I had gone breaching, and I was teaching people how to blow freaking doors off and blow walls and stuff like that. So, how to dynamically enter buildings. So I thought that small part of my career was behind me, because I had been in the Army 7 years before I went to sniper school, and then I went in 2009, so talking 9 to 14. So, I mean, that's only like 5 years, even kind of in and out of the community. So it was really small. And I mean, most guys don't spend much time in the community anyways, but
yeah,
I just thought it was kind of over with. And then I ended up back at the schoolhouse, just kind of out of happenstance, and it was like, okay, I'm here. Let me make the most of it. And my, when I was going through my certification process, my sniper buddy, who was also going through the certification process, had just come from writing the manual for snipers. He had been up at the doctrine headquarters writing the manual. And so I was like, hey man, I've been out of this for a minute. Like, we have a whole rifle system that's here that wasn't here when I left. Like, I'm behind the power curve right now. Can you, so he was like, yeah, absolutely. I'll get you squared away. So we went through our certification process together, and we became good friends. And, I just saw some of the things he was doing, how involved in the community he was. And that inspired me to get involved too. And so, cause a lot of guys will go and become instructors, and then that's it. Like, it's a 9 to 5 job to them. And it just always meant more to me. And so, I really dived into it. And then I started writing for magazines and stuff like that on different topics in long range shooting, different topics in sniping. We started to compete in, civilian competitions, shooting comps and stuff. And then, started to compete representing the Army over in Israel and things like that. So, started to kind of make a little bit of a name for myself. So when I was getting close to getting out of the Army and retiring, there was a vacancy in that position as the precision effects capability developer. And so the guy who was leaving the position, who was actually going to take over as the boss of that directorate, came down to the schoolhouse and said, hey, typically we've had people that are retiring and leaving the schoolhouse that fill that role because we want people who are relevant, that are recently from the community. And so he was like, do you guys, is there anybody who would be good for this role? And there was one other guy that was actually closer to retirement than me. And so he came and he asked him, and that guy was like, I'm not your dude. Like, I'm not in it anymore. Like, I'm getting out and I'm going to go be a truck driver. That's my goal right now. And so he was like, but that guy over there, like, he's your dude. He's the guy who's, when we need new equipment at the schoolhouse, he's got the connections. When we need, you pick up that magazine over there, you'll find an article written in it by that guy. You look on social media and you want to see placings in a competition, that guy might have gone to shoot it, like that kind of things. And so he was like, that guy's more up to speed on what's going on in the community than I am. So he's like, that's your dude for the job. So then he came to me and he was like, are you interested? And I was like, yeah, I was like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, and like getting out of the Army, like,
yeah, it's tough.
That's not anything I've really thought about for the last 20 years, so,
right.
I kind of fell into it, and I was out of the Army for 4 days before I started that job. So,
wow.
I mean, it kind of worked out for me. I mean, I did things that paved the way, but it wasn't my intent.
And then how long did you hold that position? Or did you
I held it for a couple of years.
Okay.
I held it for a couple of years. I got some programs through. Actually, this one you can see on the wall right here. That's for the new Army sniper rifle, the Mark 22. They gave me an award for it or whatever. But
crazy.
That was one of the things. Actually, the very first article I wrote. The second article I wrote was Army procurement and its detriment to the sniper's mission success. So I wrote that about 2 years before I went and took over the position I was talking about. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Because we had been needing a new sniper rifle for the better part of a decade, and there kept being all these different like procurement issues, these program issues, and there was all kinds of reasons why. That article, if I could rewrite it, I would rewrite about 25% of it. So I think 75% of it still stands.
Mm-hmm.
But there's 25% that I just couldn't have known until I took the position over.
Yeah.
I don't know where I was going with that. I was kind of lost track my train of thought. But
what is the Mark 22 in a nutshell?
So that's the Barrett MRAD, but it's the military version. Where I was going with that is I stayed around long enough to get a few things to the finish line that I was interested in. And then I realized working for the Army as a civilian sucks just as bad as working for the Army as a soldier. And I didn't need to do that anymore. So I left.
That's where we ran into you, right? Where we crossed paths at SHOT Show. You were doing that at the time, right?
Yeah. That was my first time at SHOT, and I was in that procurement role. Yeah.
Yeah, because we ran into you over at Knight's Armaments booth.
Yep, that's right.
So
that's right. So yeah, but so it's the military's version of the MRAD. So it's very similar to an MRAD, but there are a few distinct differences. Mainly being it's a 3 caliber system. If you go buy one as a MRAD, you're going to buy it as one caliber. So the Mark 22 kit is going to come with an optic. It's going to come with a scope mount. It's going to come with bipods. It's going to come with 3 different barrels. It's going to come with, 10 magazines, in 2 different calibers, or 2 different cartridge sizes. It's going to come with a deployment kit, all that kind of stuff like that. So it's going to come kitted out the way it would come kitted out for the soldier.
Right.
But as far as like physical differences between an MRAD and a Mark 22, really the biggest one is like the barrel torque and stuff like that. And now they may have changed it. I haven't seen a current MRAD, like a civilian MRAD. They may have changed it so that way it's just universal across the board. It makes sense from a manufacturing standpoint to do that. But I know initially when we were looking at them, the original MRADs were like 85 inch-pounds for their barrel torque tension, or their barrel torque bolts, and like the Army version, I think it's, man, don't get me wrong, but I think it's like it's either 125 or like 145 inch-pounds.
Okay.
For tension, and that's all deriving from zero retention requirements. So when you change barrels and then change back, it has to stay within a certain standard for zero retention.
Okay.
And that's partly why the military version has such a high torque spec.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then, so you said the military version comes with like set up to run multiple calibers, so you can swap barrels.
Yeah. So the MRAD is multi-role adaptive design. That's what MRAD stands for.
Oh, okay.
And so it has always been a barrel changeable, caliber changeable system. Sorry about that. So you've always been able to run all the different calibers you can, just like you can in a Mark 22. But it already comes with all those barrels and accessories needed to do it. Where normally if you bought an MRAD, you buy it with one caliber system, and then you'd have to buy all the rest separately. The Mark 22 comes in 308, 300 Norma, and then 338 Norma.
Okay. Did you find it pretty challenging to get the Army to make decisions on stuff like that, or are they pretty excited to adopt new things?
Yes and no. I achieved a lot of success when I was in that role, and so my opinion is probably skewed from a lot of guys who's been in that role's opinion. I'll be honest with you. I think a lot of the reason why the soldier doesn't get the equipment they need as quickly as they need it is because a lot of the precision, or a lot of the capability developers, the people who are in the role like I was in, are terrible at their jobs. Just flat out. Yeah. And that's why I said I think about 75% of that article I wrote initially was accurate. And you see that, I see that in programs all the way up to the day I left, where people had cut and pasted previous programs and then just changed a couple things on it, thinking that was going to work out. And then a program never makes it to fruition because there's all kinds of flaws in it. And it's like, well, what makes you think that other program wasn't fucked up to begin with, and then you just cut and pasted it, but now it's 2 decades down the road, and so like the things that applied then don't apply now, and you had the problems you had from before. So like, I just, I didn't take that approach in the job. I actually try to approach the job correctly and try to do things the way they're supposed to be done. And I'm not saying I did everything perfect, but I didn't freaking half-ass it. And so when I got there, the program was broken. It was on the mend, but it was broken. I was coming into a program that had been broken for over a decade. And like SOCOM they had decided on the rifle, and we were adopting their program, but like their program was hot trash, and it was nothing the Army was ever going to buy off on. And so we couldn't just take their program, slap Big Army on it, and then call it okay, because that's just not how it works. For one, they've got different requirements than we do, or than I should say the big army does. I shouldn't say we do because it's not me anymore. But they've got
Old
different
habits.
requirements that the big army does. And then also they cut, from a lot of just standpoints, they cut corners. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. I don't know who listens to this podcast, so I might just piss a couple people off by saying that, but they cut corners. I mean, it's just straight up. They decide they want something and they'll write a requirement around the thing they want rather than go out and do their due diligence on freaking testing things.
Yeah.
That's the exact reason why the big army has a loophole scope on their Mark 22 and SOCOM has a Night Force. It's not because the army didn't test the Night Force. It's not because the Night Force wasn't a good scope. But it was because when we got it all, when it was all said and done and we freaking tested apples to apples, a decision had to be made based off of the performance, that we saw in front of us, and it wasn't the Night Force,
right?
And so that's not, and like I said, it's not to say the Night Force isn't a good scope. It's a great scope. I'm not even going to say that. It's not to say that looking through the Night Force, it's not a better scope to look through. But that's not the only performance measure of a scope.
Yeah.
Right. It's just not.
Yeah.
And that's the things that people don't understand. And that's the kind of things that, like, they had already decided they wanted that scope. And so they wrote the requirement for that scope. And they didn't want to look at anything else. So they didn't, Big Army couldn't do that. They couldn't do that. So they went out and they tested everything that was submitted, and then we chose what we chose. So, but, with programs being run the way they're supposed to be run and run correctly, like, it takes time but if you do it right and you have the right people in the right roles, like, you can get things across the finish line. And that's why I think we were successful, and granted, I had the right leadership that was motivated to do things too. And it took a lot of selling and it took a lot of freaking heartache and a lot of freaking heartburn, and a lot of long hours, but, I mean, we did it. We did it. Shit, I got a freaking rifle. I got a new optic on our freaking semi-autos. I got a new butt stock. We got new tripods. We got freaking, tools into our freaking toolkits. We got all kinds of things across the finish line in the 2 years I was in that job. And it was like, man, people in that job for freaking, 5 years couldn't get one thing across the finish line. It's like, I don't even understand it.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to what you were originally talking about being passionate versus just having it like a 9-to-5 job. If you're truly passionate about it, you're going to put in those long hours and work, and you're not going to just take the shortcuts to get the job done. You're going to actually, do what's right, I guess. So
yeah. And not to say that all those guys were bad dudes or, not great Americans. I'm sure they were in their own right, but it's just, it's having the right people in the freaking job,
Yeah. So I guess less about your, I guess, not working for yourself. Now you're working for yourself. So tell us a little bit about that, how that's going.
And the guy I work for now is a piece of shit.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now. So so me and the other Chris, that I was going through certification with when I went to sniper school, we became good buddies, and we saw a lot of things we didn't agree with, kind of where this whole conversation's been going, both at sniper school and then kind of in the civilian shooting market and stuff like that, and the competition world and things. So we saw a lot of dogma out there, a lot of things that were being taught that just weren't right. It's like, that's just not correct. It's just patently false, So we just kind of always thought, like, hey, if we ever had an opportunity to kind of do it on our own, maybe we would. And so, kind of towards the end of my tenure in that job, working for the Army as a civilian, I was bored. As COVID was going on, we were all sequestered at our houses, working from home, and it was like, hey, you want to go run a course? And he was like, yeah, let's do it, man. So we did. We went down to arena and we ran a course, and it went really well. We didn't quite sell it out, but we had a good turnout. So we're like, hey, that went really well. I mean, things need to be polished up and whatever. So then we ran another one, and that one did well too. So after running 2 or 3 of them, it was like, hey, this could be a real business. So I should probably like get insurance, and I should probably get a business license, and I probably should, do some of these things correct. So that way, I don't lose my house, when somebody gets hurt at the range or something. And so, I officially started CR2. So he was still active. He's still active now. And so I started CR2 and under the agreement that, I was going to move forward with it. And then, when he's out, we'll kind of reassess and see what the deal is. And so the CR2 kind of name came actually from a friend, Frank Galley of Sniper Side and the Everyday Sniper podcast. He kind of coined us the CR2s because we're both a CR.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where that name came from. And we just started doing it, man, just taking it one course at a time. And then when I left my job, I decided to go full time into CR2. And that's kind of it, man. It just, once I did that, it was like turning the freaking spigot on, because then it was like, I ran 12 courses within that first year, and, probably 10 of them were sold out. So nice. It was just like when I put the effort into it and directed my focus at CR2, it blew up, So now we're just about to hit our third year. In September will be the third year of business. So, and we've expanded into a few other things. I got an actual full-time employee working for me now, and we're doing retail, and man, it's just growing.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what kind of courses do you offer?
So we're still doing our precision rifle courses. So our level 1s, we haven't run a level 2 in a while, just because, honestly, people got to go to level 1s to get to level 2s. And so, it's kind of hard to fill a level 2. So we just haven't done one of those in a while. We fill a lot of level 2s or level 1s. So that's kind of our bread and butter.
Yeah.
And then we do, a low light precision course. So shooting long range at night using thermals and high square, devices. And those are kind of the majority of what we do right now as far as instruction is concerned. I do quite a bit of private instruction and small group and private contracted business stuff. We have some things in the future that we're working on. There's going to be kind of one of Chris's babies. The other Chris is kind of a light fighter course. He's gotten real into drones and communications over the last few years. And I mean, obviously that's always been a thing that's been relevant for us, coming from the sniper community. Obviously, hell, just in the Army as a whole, being able to communicate and being able to collect battlefield information has always been at the forefront. So that's something that he's really, really dug into, and he's kind of become a well-known name in that space. So he's been working on that, and probably either later on this year or early next year, we should be launching the kind of light fighter course, which will kind of tie, that drones, communications, and some shooting aspect kind of together.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
That sounds legit.
Yeah, that sounds super sick.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of random question, but who came up with your logo idea? I've always really liked your logo. It's like, for those that can't see it, the CR2, or it looks like CR squared, and it's like in the periodic table kind of style.
Oh yeah, well, he's got it on.
Yeah.
I'm
we
repping it right now.
both have a shirt. I forgot to put mine on today, but yeah.
Yeah. So, initially it was Chris who kind of came up with it, and then my wife's a graphic designer.
Oh,
so
cool.
She fleshed it out into what it is today. And honestly, it was kind of, like I said, out of a happenstance, because Frank came up with the CR2s. Chris kind of threw it in a box, just as like, hey, let's have a logo and we'll call it CR2, and then we'll throw it in a box. And then it was like, well, that looks like an element from the periodic table.
Yeah.
And so it was like, what is CR on that periodic table? And it was like, well, I looked into it. It was like, well, it's actually an element. It's chromium.
I was about to say chromium.
It's commonly used in friggin' making steel.
Yeah.
And, which is used in friggin' shooting guns, using in the metal that we use to make these guns and shit. So I was like, this actually works out really cool.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, that's worked well for us. And then I don't know if you saw our other shirt design, but we did a periodic table of marksmanship shirt.
I did see that. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so that one took a while. Actually, kind of designing our own periodic table that was like all the functional elements of the shot process and stuff. So that was a pretty rad one. It did well too, actually. We're actually there's a company that I'm pretty good friends with that does like the tech mats, like the the match your keyboard or your gun cleaning mats and stuff. They do those, and so we've been toying around with the idea of launching our own set of mats and stuff, and one of them being that mat.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Ooh, that would be cool.
Yeah,
sick.
Yeah.
Well, while we have you, one of the things we really wanted to talk about today is just basically getting into precision rifle. It's actually,
you got the wrong dude.
yeah, somehow. It's actually one of the most frequent questions we get from people that listen to the podcast, and it's like, hey, what do you think about precision rifle setups? What do you think about bolt gun setups? How would you set up or are you guys into PRS? It's a very, very common question. And the short answer is no, we're not really into PRS stuff. So, we'd like to get into it. And Steven and I are actually planning on building a bolt gun this year, to start getting more into it. But I think it's an incredibly important topic to go over and talk about, but as you are a subject matter expert, we wanted to bend your ear on it and hopefully get some advice on that. So, I guess kind of starting out the topic, where do you think a good place to start is? I mean, I guess for me, it'd be,
so I think a good place to start is kind of the commonplace for all shooting, and that is the shot process.
Okay.
And kind of why we take the approach that we take when we talk about shooting, and why we call it the shot process, why we deal with things that way. Because I think that's a common misconception. I think there's a few common misconceptions with shooting. Well, for one, we'll start off with what you said, and that's PRS. So what does PRS mean to you? I'm asking.
Oh.
Like what does that acronym mean to you?
Precision rifle shooting.
I look at it like from the competition side a little bit. I would say like actually going out and competing to do long range shooting, I guess. Okay. I mean, obviously it applies to other means, but as far as just like going out and competing against someone, like actually seeing how your skill compares to someone else, I feel like that's the best way to kind of figure that out.
Well, yeah, and that's something that we get a lot when people ask us, "Hey, are you into PRS?" And my first thing I had to ask them is, "Are you talking about the sport or the series?"
Yeah.
Because there's a series called the PRS, and honestly, the series has made precision rifle shooting very popular. I mean, and they've become almost synonymous with each other, but they aren't the same thing. And so you definitely have to ask people that. It's like, well, do you want to shoot accurately and over long distance because you want to be able to do precision rifle shooting, or do you want to compete? Because those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
So like, what does that mean? And so that's the first thing I like to identify with people, and not because I want to just delve down into the nuance of freaking individual words so much that it's painful to even talk to me, but like we need to have a common understanding of what it is that we are talking about. And that is part of the reason why we use the shot process rather than fundamentals. So my next question for you guys is, what are the fundamentals?
Oh man.
This isn't to make you look bad or anything. I just want to know what's the fundamentals.
So I guess specifically for precision shooting,
don't make it precision shooting. Make it shooting.
Okay.
You're just talking like sight picture.
Yeah.
All that stuff. Is that what you're
Yeah,
asking?
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'd say trigger pull, understanding sight picture, understanding like whatever your sighting system is, how it works, whether that's a reticle, whether that's iron sights, whatever it is, and then understanding your ballistics and your specific caliber load, whatever you want to call it, understanding what that's capable of, and basically what you're working with. Breathing, I think breathing would be a big part of that as well. And then shooting position or body position. I think those would be some basic fundamental things.
Okay. So,
not necessarily in that order, but yeah.
I ask people that because when I do, I get a bunch of different answers. And so the Army had 4 fundamentals. Okay. When we taught marksmanship in the Army, we taught the fundamentals of marksmanship. Then there was 4. There was 4 fundamentals of marksmanship. Now there was a bunch of other things listed under those fundamentals of marksmanship, but there was 4 fundamentals of marksmanship. It was your steady position, your sight picture, sight alignment, trigger squeeze, or something like that. Anyways, I can't fucking remember anymore because it's been so long. But when I asked people what the fundamentals of my marksmanship were, they would give me, and I get like 10, 12 different answers, right? And so I asked them like, well, I just asked a bunch of different people what the fundamentals of marksmanship were, and you guys can't agree. Okay. So if you can't agree what the fundamentals of a marksmanship are, then my question for you are they fundamental? So let's see what the word fundamental means. Forming a necessary base or core of central importance. Cannot exist without. So if something can't exist without, or it's the fundamental core of something, and you don't know what it is, or we can't agree that it is the fundamental core of something, then is it fundamental?
Well, I think even with all the things that we listed, I mean, technically you can sacrifice multiple of those and still shoot accurately. I mean,
so if you can sacrifice them,
I know, that's what I'm saying.
And still achieve success, is it a fundamental?
I know, exactly.
No.
That was the key point. You said can't exist without, or whatever that was at the tail end of the of the definition of fundamental.
Yeah, I mean that's it. That's the crux of it. So if it's not truly fundamental, then why are we calling it that? Okay, because then it breeds a lot of just misunderstanding and misconception.
Right.
Now, I think all those things are very important. Let's just, before we lose anybody else on this podcast, I think all those things are fundamentally important. Okay. Right. But I don't think that they're all equally important. And I think that situation dictates, right?
Absolutely.
Now, I don't want to be one of those people that just says MET-TC to everything, because I think that's a shitty answer for people who don't actually understand things.
Right.
But the situation actually absolutely depends. And so this is the point where, like, when I'm teaching a class, I usually stand to the side of my rifle that's sitting on a tripod, and I hit a target that's at 400 yards away by just reaching over and touching my trigger. And it's like, and I ask the students, so how many fundamentals did I just use? Usually they're like 1. I'm like, okay, well, if I can still achieve success at a target that's probably farther than the majority of you have ever shot, then we can probably agree that the fundamentals are hot trash. And let's talk about the shot process, because the shot process is it's a logical, or we could even say chronological list of steps in order, to achieve success, right? And when you think about shooting, it's a process. That's exactly what it is. We have to apply certain functional elements in a certain order, okay, in order to achieve success. And when we do so, it starts to become logical with the way our brain actually works. So they actually did some studies, and what they found was the human brain is terrible at multitasking. We always talk about, oh, I'm a good multitasker. Women are better multitaskers than men, all this kind of stuff. And what we found out is that, like, we're not actually good at multitasking. What we do is we actually, like, rack and stack or tier things based off of importance. Okay. So like driving is a perfect example. So I remember back when I was stationed at Fort Campbell as a young soldier, I'd get off of work on Friday or on a Thursday if I had a 4-day. And, I'd want to go see my bride. She wasn't my bride at the time, but I'd want to go see my girlfriend back in Michigan, 8-hour drive. And so I would usually hop in the shower, get cleaned up, drive over to the shopette, get some gas, get some coffee, a couple Mountain Dews, a freaking few tornadoes, off the roller at the, and then I, pack of cigarettes because I smoked back then, and then hit the road. And so about 3 hours into my drive is when I'd get onto I-71 in northern Kentucky. Well, right at the beginning, I-71 is a rest stop. And then there's almost nothing until you get off onto I-75. There's actually a total of like 3 exits at the time. And it was like the Kentucky Speedway and a couple other things. There almost wasn't even street light or like, the lights along the expressway. It was dark. So by the time I'm there, it's 10 o'clock at night, and I-71 was 101 miles. And I remember that because I was in the 101st. It was 101 miles on this stretch of road. And so I would remember coming out of the rest stop because, usually 3 hours into the drive, you got to pee. So I'd come out of the rest stop. I'd get on the expressway, get back up to speed. And, back then I had a freaking V8 Cougar, so I'd be freaking flying. And I'm messing with the radio, smoking a cigarette, sipping a Mountain Dew. And next thing you know, I'd be getting off at I-75. And I'd think to myself, where did that last hour just go? Like, I don't even remember the expressway for the last 101 miles. And yes, I said I went 101 miles an hour. like how many people did I pass? I don't know. So clearly I was good enough at multitasking to not wreck my car, but I wasn't even good at multitasking enough to remember what I did.
Yeah.
I just remember looking down at my radio, and then when I looked back up, I was getting off the expressway 101 miles later. And during that time, I had drank a Mountain Dew, flipped through the radio, drove a car, smoked some cigarettes, And so if we think about things from the fundamental standpoint, where everything's important and it's all equally important, what we find is we have a breakdown in our marksmanship ability. Okay, because we're trying to apply all the fundamentals with the exact same importance at the same time. And we just talked about it. You can completely skip steps and still be successful. So with the shot process, what we do is we apply them in order. We don't try to think about them in a multitask mindset. Okay. Hey, I need to build a steady position. I build the steady position. Now I move on to the next thing. Now I move on to the next thing. I had part of my steady position is my natural point of aim. Great. Okay. Steady position is done. Natural point of aim is done. Now I need to get a good sight picture, get a good sight alignment. Okay, I've got to hold for wind. I got to dial my elevation. And so you're going through these steps in this process. And when you're done with something, you can move it down to a lower tier of importance, which is the way the brain actually works. Okay. And so that's what the shot process is it's applying shooting into a process. And so it wasn't that all those things that we talked about before went away. It's just adapting shooting to the way the brain works.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So basically you're starting with whatever your goal is, hit this target at whatever distance, and then whatever you got to do to make that happen, you just start with whatever your priority would be, which would be, I guess, building your position, your stable shooting platform, and then just working your way until you've got rounds on target.
Right. Yeah. So our functional elements is stability, aim, control, and movement. Within stability, it's how do you build stability? I can lay on the ground and let the ground support my rifle. I can use bipods or rear bag. I could rest my rifle on a tripod, bipods, rest my rifle on a freaking, a barricade. Okay. Whatever I needed to do to create stability. All right. I can support the rifle with my body. All right. But now I have muscular support or bone support. Obviously bone support is better because my muscles are going to fatigue over time. Same thing goes into building a position, shooting off a barricade. If I'm leaning over into the barricade, I'm imparting my body weight, and since I'm bent over at the waist, I'm using my core muscles, which are activating, and now are going to fatigue over time, which is going to be imparted into my rifle. So what are ways I can build stability? I can back off my rifle. I can use a rear support by bringing a tripod over and using it as a rear support. I can use support bags, whatever I need to do. There's all kinds of different ways we can create support. All right. So then we move into aim. Oh, what are some of the components of aim? Well, focus, sight alignment, sight picture, our hold. Those are all things that we have to think about and apply to our shot process. Okay, so then we do that. Then we go into control. Well, how do we control our rifle? Well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab it. What's our grip look like? Okay, what's our trigger control? What's our breath control? Follow through, recoil management. All right, back when we built stability, we used what's called natural point of aim to make sure we had good stability and enable our recoil management and our follow through. Okay. If we had good natural point of aim, we're going to have good recoil management and we're going to be able to follow through really well, which is going to mean that we're going to be able to then be able to follow up on another shot if we need to.
Yep.
And so it ties back in together. But like, what happens when we come up to a barricade that's rickety? Okay. Well, hey, maybe my stability is going to be sacrificed. But does it mean I can't make a shot? Of course I can make a shot. Maybe. Depending on the situation. But I can probably still make a shot. But hey, I'm not going to be able to put as much support into my rifle. I'm not going to be able to lean into the buttstock as much. So maybe I need to back off my shoulder from the buttstock a little bit and just lightly apply pressure.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe my trigger control and my breath control and the way I'm gripping my rifle are now going to be even more important than they were when I had my rifle supported like it was in a vise. Because if my rifle is supported in such a stable position that it's like in a vise, I can get away with a lot more. Yeah. I can have shitty trigger squeeze and shitty breathing if my rifle's not moving because it's so supported. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so that's the way we think about things when we think about them in a process that's adapted to the situation that we're fucking shooting in. And that's kind of the point behind the shot process versus the fundamentals of marksmanship. Because the fundamental of marksmanship is everything's important, it's all equally important, and it's all important at the same time. All right. And that's just not true. And if you really, really start talking to guys that are, they've been doing this for a while, you talk to those guys from the Army Marksmanship Unit, even a lot of the guys that still teach fundamentals, they actually teach it as part of a process. Mm-hmm. They don't really teach it the way it's actually written. And that's why it's funny because I hear a lot more guys using the shot process these days. And I want to be clear too. The shot process it's not our thing. Our delivery is our thing, but we didn't think of the shot process. That's actually something the Army's been using now for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years, maybe even longer than that.
Okay.
It's been written in a doctrine for a while now. And even then it was something that was derived from other shooters and instructors before that.
Cool.
It makes a lot more sense. It's basically what you're doing, even if you understand you are or not, because like you said, you're not able to do all those things at once. You're, even mentally, like if you're lining up to especially take a longer shot, you're doing it for any time you shoot, but I'm just thinking about myself, if I'm lining up to shoot a target at, 450 meters, there's a process that you're just naturally going through. And it basically mirrors exactly what you just said. You're trying to get stable so you can get, good sight alignment. And then, now I got to think about my trigger press and I'm getting ready to shoot. So I'm going to hold my breath or whatever it is, So it's not, you're
and
not
that's why
simultaneously doing it.
When I first asked you, well, what's the fundamentals of marksmanship? And you were like, well, for precision shooting, it's like, no. Yeah. This is just shooting.
Right.
This could be pistol shooting.
Yeah.
That's the shot process. The shot process. I'll apply it differently to the platform, right? Because grip is is my grip is how I achieve steady position with a pistol, right? But it's still the shot process.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely applicable for all shooting. So,
yeah, I think it's kind of funny because it, you know, and you made me realize this when I started bringing stuff up, and then you stripped it down. I think it's easy to conflate like what's important about marksmanship versus what's actually needed, you know, what is truly fundamental. And yeah, I think that's an important distinction to make, because there are a lot of things that are important, but that's never ending. I mean, you can go on forever and, you should have a dope book, and, you know, you can just start like going down the line. But ultimately it's like to shoot a shot and hit a target. It's like, what is truly fundamental.
That's it. Those are the true fundamentals, right? To fire your rifle without disturbing it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Sick. So what do you think kind of comes next then? You've got your shot process, you get that dialed in, you get good at going through that process in an efficient fashion.
Well, so I think one of the things that goes hand in hand, really, so not necessarily after, so kind of how hand in hand is the way you set your rifle up.
Okay.
You know, so that goes into ergonomics. Your rifle, especially now, they're very adjustable, and they can be set up to the way that your body position, or your body composition, I should say, is set up. You know, all three of us are different heights, different weights, different set, you know, different build. And so we're not going to shoot a rifle the same way. We're not going to be as comfortable behind a rifle the same way. And so setting a rifle up to your style of shooting and your body composition is vitally important. Now there's certain, you know, kind of truths, you know, like there's certain things that have to happen in rifle setup. You know, but for the most part, it's adaptive to you. Just like with shooting, there's certain things that have to happen. You have to fire your rifle. It has to hit the target without being disturbed, you know. Well, your rifle has to be set up so you can see through it.
Yeah.
You know, that has to happen. So how do we do that? Well, you know, the first thing we're going to start with is our length of pull, you know, adjusting our buttstock so that way we can position our body straight behind it. That's what the primary purpose behind length of pull is. And I say that because the primary thing that we see people, the primary symptom of an incorrect length of pull becomes their body position. They start to cant their bodies off to the side when their length of pull is too long. Think of, you know, you guys were both in the Army, so think of that female shooting a M16.
Oh yeah.
You know, you had that fixed buttstock that's super long. I don't know who the hell that thing's made for, like a 6'2" man, you know, that's skinny, because I'm a 6'2" man. And I can tell you right now, with my pectorals and freaking shoulders, like it's wrong for me too. But you know, so what do? In order to see through the sights, they have to cant off to the side dramatically. And that, like I said, when we talk about natural point of aim, is a critical breakdown, because they can't get a natural point of aim because they're canted over to the side. And because they don't have a natural point of aim, they're canted over the side, they have terrible follow through. And they have terrible follow through because they have bad recoil management.
Yeah.
And so these things become tied together based off of an improperly set up rifle. So your length of pull is the first ergonomic connection to that rifle. Some people might say the grip, but I think you could start at either one. So the first thing that will adjust is our length of pull. The second thing that will adjust is our cheek piece height, if you have an adjustable cheek piece height. And what you're trying to achieve there is so that way your eye is on the same level as the bore line or the center bore of your optic. You want to be able to see through your optic while it's on max power. That's a key thing. A lot of people don't realize that, but while it's on max power, You want to be able to see through your optic and have no shadowing effect. And that shadowing effect will appear like a dark crescent at the top or bottom of your optic. I say max power because when an optic's on its max power, it has its most restrictive field of view, and it has its most restrictive eye box. Mm-hmm. If you put it in a low power, it's very favorable, and you can get away with a lot of things and not realize that you're actually in a bad position. And so we want to put that scope always on max power whenever we're looking through it and we're trying to adjust things. The next thing we want to adjust is our eye relief. Okay. This is not done by adjusting length of pull. And that's where a lot of people get confused, because length of pull you can adjust that without ever having an optic on a gun. You don't need an optic. You don't need sights of any sort. You adjust your length of pull simply based off of your body composition. It's kind of hard to talk it through. It's kind of more of a demonstration thing, but essentially you want to basically put your buttstock in the crook of your elbow, and you want with your arm bent in your hand on the grip. You want the grip to be in the palm of your hand, and your trigger finger be able to reach 90 degrees to the trigger. That's how you would set your length to pull. Your eye relief is when you get in the prone or standing or kneeling or whatever, and you have your face rested on the gun and you have the correct cheek height. You already have set your length to pull. Now you want to be able to see through your scope without a tunneling effect. And a tunneling effect is just imagine looking through a straw. Does it get really, really small, or do you have a big flat black donut? That's either caused by your scope being too close to your eye or too far away. So all you'd have to do at that point in time is move your scope. And I'd recommend that people move the whole scope and base at the same time, or scope and rings at the same time, and just move it up or forward or backwards like a Picatinny slot, until there's no vignetting and no tunneling effect. Next thing that we like to look at is grip. So the actual physical grip itself, I highly recommend using a grip the way it's meant to be used. So if you have a pistol grip that's meant to be used with your thumb wrapped, use it thumb wrapped. I know a lot of people, when they shoot semi-automatic guns, precision, they shoot them for precision. Mm-hmm. They like to have thumb over. And the idea behind that is they want to minimize sympathetic movement. Well, the problem with they do that is, if you take a look at your hand, when you go from thumb wrapped to thumb over, is you actually break contact with the grip. You'll actually remove about half of your hand from being in contact with the grip. And if you ever said to a pistol shooter, if you want to shoot more accurately, take more of your hand off the grip, they would laugh at you.
Yeah.
But for some reason, the only way we can minimize sympathetic movement in shooting a rifle is to remove our hand from our grip. I don't understand why that makes sense to people. So my recommendation, especially since grips are usually about $15 to $20, is get a grip that fits your fucking hand.
Yeah.
Change it. Put a different one on your gun. If it's meant to have a thumb wrapped, have a thumb wrapped. If it's meant to have a thumb over, have a thumb over. And there's plenty of grips that are meant to have your thumb over. If that's what you prefer to do when you shoot, have a grip that's made for you to shoot that way. It's just that simple. Because then you will have positive contact from your hand and the grip on your rifle, and it will support you in the way you're shooting and allow you to have positive control over your rifle. What we see more often when people use that thumb wrap grip is they have a lot of linear movement in their grouping. So that side-to-side printing on the paper, even though that's literally what they're trying to minimize, when they say minimize sympathetic movement, that's what they're trying to minimize. And then the next thing that they do is they'll go back and forth with their safeties. So when they come up to a position, they'll have their thumb wrapped, they'll flip it on safe or flip it on fire, put their thumb over, shoot a little bit, come back, flip it on safe. And then when it's time to shoot again, flip it on fire, go back, shoot a little bit, come back over, flip it on safe. And it's like, well, if you just left your thumb where it was to begin with, you could have saved yourself a whole lot of time and effort.
Yeah.
So
and minimize movement.
Right?
Yeah.
So those are kind of our big things with ergonomics and setting your rifle up. Obviously, you have to look at focus. You have to look at parallax. You have to look at, focus, and Yeah, focus is the next one that you're going to adjust, but the big muscle movements is the ergonomic connection to your rifle.
Yeah, where do you think a lot of people, or where do you see the biggest mistakes in that? It sounded like length of pull is a pretty big one.
Yeah, length of pull is huge because it's not as immediately present to people that they have bad length of pull. Because natural point of aim is one of the first things that break down on people. Because people are not aware of their bodies. Hang on, let's look at it. Sneeze again. Ah, we're good. People are not aware. They're not self-aware, right?
Yeah.
And so they don't really understand when their body is compromised, and they don't have good natural point of aim. And so, especially when trying to build steady positions, I will say that natural point of aim is uncomfortable for most people when they're learning how to achieve natural point of aim. And so they will immediately go to what's comfortable.
Yeah.
And what's comfortable is a poor natural point of aim.
Yeah.
And they typically derive from a poor length of pull.
Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that. Because it is almost, it's like anytime you switch anything that you've been doing for a long time, it's going to be really uncomfortable until it's not. So, like if that's the way you've been shooting.
Precision shooting is putting your buttstock as close to center line as possible. People have been taught to put your buttstock in the pocket of your shoulder, and that's coming from that tactical shooting mindset where we have body armor on or we have some kind of kit, and so we're looking for that positive contact between our buttstock and our body, right? Because I don't want to throw my buttstock up onto a big padded shoulder strap.
Yeah,
and so I go out there into the pocket of my shoulder. Well, for precision shooting, that's not good.
Yeah.
Because you don't have good sight puncher and sight alignment and natural point of aim when you do that. So in our shooting, in our world, we bring the buttstocks as close to a center line as possible. Now, we can't put them perfectly center line on our body because that's not where our eyes are positioned. They're positioned off to the side.
Yeah.
So we got to bring it as close to the edge of our neck. And so then people are putting their buttstocks on their collarbone and they're like, oh, that's uncomfortable. It's like, it is. Until you get used to it.
Yeah.
And then it's not,
Yep. Yeah, that's just anything, man. That's like anytime we've taught handgun, it's like, man, you try to change anyone's grip up just a little bit, and it's like the end of the world there for a little bit until they figure it out. But
yeah.
Then
they realize how much easier it is for them to actually progress and improve.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny though. The whole grip wrap versus unwrapped, like. I'm bad about. Well, I didn't even know it was bad until now. I'm gonna have to go try it.
I catch myself. I
unwrap all the time. Exactly what you're talking about. I don't, and my grip is not designed for it. So when I shoot my any semi-auto rifle precision, I'm using air quotes precision. I definitely flip my thumb over to the offside, and keep it over there for some reason. So I'll have to start paying attention to that more. But
yeah, really, what I find is it's poor trigger manipulation, right? That people are trying. They're thinking that if I put my thumb over there, I can minimize the amount of finger interaction with the trigger.
Yeah,
and when I do that, I'll have a better trigger press. Therefore, I'll be able to shoot more accurately. Okay. I understand where that thought process comes from. One, I'll go back to get a grip that fits your hand.
Yeah.
If that's truly your problem. Two, pay attention to your trigger manipulation.
Right.
I could stand directly off to the side and pull my trigger, which is like I talked about. I do in a demonstration with my students, and have good trigger manipulation. I don't have to hold my grip at all. And so it's like, I could crack this egg in so many different ways. So just pay attention to your trigger manipulation. Like, you don't have to let go of the damn thing in order to do it correctly.
Yeah.
just pay attention to it.
Yeah.
It's funny because, we typically tell people, hey, you want to use the first meaty portion of your finger, you don't want to wrap your finger too far into it because you want to maximize the amount of joints you have in your finger so you can get as close to rearward trigger press as possible. Now, I say that to people, and then when you look at the other CR shoot, you're like, oh my God, that's absolutely disgusting because he's got his booger hook fucking wrapped all the way up into that trigger well. Like, I don't understand how that man shoots straight. Considering like he's all the way up to this knuckle when he's shooting.
Really?
Oh yeah. And it just but it goes to show that like if you just pay attention to your trigger manipulation, you can achieve good trigger manipulation without having to do weird things with your hand.
Yeah.
And
I imagine the weirder you get with your hand, the weirder your trigger pull is going to be. So if it's more natural, I guess, to booger hook it, then it probably is going to shoot a little bit. It's going to pull better than if you were like trying to force
think about
it.
when you teach pistol shooters, are you teaching them to use the tip of their, the end of their finger, or are they more or less booger hooking it?
Yeah, it's kind of dependent. It's kind of dependent on the person, I guess. It depends on the grip as well.
You're not all the way out here when you're pulling a pistol trigger.
Yeah,
you're more in here.
Yeah.
I mean, you might not be all the way down to that last knuckle, but you know what I'm saying. You're more center on the finger than the tip.
Yeah, it's very dependent on the handgun too, because there's some big guys running some tiny little handguns.
Yeah,
and it's like they have no other option but to just full send their finger all the way through that thing because it's like they're too big for that gun. But
yeah,
and I think the more I'm thinking about it, it's like anytime we're running drills, anytime we set up drills where we're changing positions, running from here to there, and a more kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, tactical course of fire. Integrating some longer distance shots. It's like I keep my thumb wrapped.
Yeah.
But then for some reason, when I get into like a shooting position, I'm like, and I make those shots just fine with my thumb wrapped. So why, that's just, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm really analyzing myself now because it's for some reason, if I'm just sitting there, like taking a shot and I have time, I'm like, whoa, let me move my thumb over here, and I don't actually know why, so for some reason it feels like I can be, there can be less movement, but like I said, I have no problem making shots at the same distance, running and gunning, just quickly going into positions. I'm not taking the time to unwrap my thumb in those situations. So why am I doing it when I have time? It doesn't make any sense. It's wasted effort. So interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess since we're kind of talking builds and setups, what are some good kind of platforms that you think people should be thinking about, or do people get too hung up on the specifics? That's the part everybody cares about. That's the part that everyone's like, oh yeah, builds, But I mean, if it's anything like ARs, I think you find that it's like it's also nuanced, and at the end of the day, it's like get something that works. But yeah.
So I'll go a couple different ways with this.
Okay.
When I build a rifle, balance is the number one thing that I'm trying to achieve.
Balance.
Okay. Especially for precision shooting. Balance over weight, balance over almost anything else. For the longest time, guys were just building guns as heavy as they possibly could because weight is stability is accuracy and precision, right? Well, the problem is then you get people who can't manage their guns because these things are too freaking heavy. 20 pounds doesn't sound very heavy until you're trying to move it in and out of a barricade out in front of your body at arm's length. Okay. Most of our carbines are under 10 pounds. So when you're talking 20 plus, some guys I know up to 30 pounds in a precision rifle, and they're trying to move quickly around, around a barricade during a 90-second stage, it's pretty cumbersome,
Yeah, that's like 240 Bravo weight getting thrown around, dude. It's crazy.
It is. And so, with the advent of like the NRL Hunter and some of these other competitions where now they're putting weight limits in, but they're really kind of expecting you to do a lot of the same stuff. What people are finding is that weight is a lot less important than balance is. If my rifle is evenly balanced, I can get it stable on a barricade. And if it's stable on a barricade because it's balanced, it's stable on a barricade, period. Now, I'm going to have to manage recoil a little bit better, which goes back into my natural point of aim, which means that maybe I can't get away with some of the poor fundamentals that I had before. I can't get away with as much stuff as I got away with before. But from an accuracy or precision standpoint, it's just as accurate. It's just as accurate. Okay, so that's the number one thing I look for. And I don't pay attention to weight so much as I pay attention to balance. And how I do that simply is I build a rifle and then I throw it up on a barricade. And usually at my house, the barricade is I throw it onto the back of a step stool. I got one of those step stools that's got the railing on the back. And so I throw a game changer bag up on it, and I throw my rifle onto it, and I let go of it and see if it's going to balance. If it doesn't balance, then I usually see if there's anything I can adjust or, whatever in order to make it balance. Because that's going to be one of the most important things. If it's front heavy or back heavy, then that's going to affect the way it's going to recoil. That's going to affect my follow-up shots. Okay. So that's the number one. The next thing is finding the right tool for the right job. Whether it's an AR, whether it's a bolt gun, when you're talking caliber, you're talking optic. And this is, I got myself into a little bit of trouble earlier, late last week. I don't know if you guys saw it, about the LPVO conversation. And I said that I don't think LPVOs are very good optics. And that hurt a lot of people's feelings. I hurt a lot of people's feelings. Especially when, T-Rex freaking shared it and, Counting Q Tactical and, a few of these other people started sharing it around. Next thing you know, it went all over the place. And, I had people flocking to my freaking page to tell me why to justify their purchase. And it was everything from all these different Wazoo tactical scenarios to, and I mentioned how I thought it was ridiculous that people buy an optic that goes to 1 power and then they put a red dot on it. So that also got people fired up. In addition to the fact that I said LPVOs are not good optics. And so they were like, oh, well, we do that because of passive aiming, and I was like, God, like, dude, if you knew anything about where passive aiming comes from, I get it. Look, I get it, man. What you don't understand about the job that I just left was I was literally advising the military on what the Army sniper will be doing in the future. Okay, not the now. The now is where I was coming from. All right, in the operational force, and then the freaking institutional training force, and then I'm going into the future. So the future is like looking at like what the hell are our soldiers going to face coming up in the next fight. So when you're telling me I have to do this because the fight that I'm going to find in the future with our next enemy is going to mean that I have to passively aim, I just giggle a little bit because it just tells me that they probably are just talking based off of what they saw on the internet.
Yeah.
And it was like, who are you fighting? Who are you passively aiming against? Like, have you ever passively aimed? Do you have night vision? because the majority of these people are civilians. Then when you break it down into that category, the majority of those civilians don't own night vision.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like you couldn't passively aim if you wanted to because you don't own the device you need to passively aim with.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did this based off of a trend is the first thing. Second of all, passively aiming is a pain in the ass.
It is.
Okay. You know, it's not fun. Okay. I know it's a cool trend right now. It's a fun trend, but it's not fun. It's not something that we choose to do because we like to do it, or, you know, it was something that we did. Honestly, it started off because not every soldier had lasers.
Yeah.
That's why we passively aimed. Not every soldier had a fucking laser on his rifle. It wasn't until GWAT that every soldier that was in the close combat force started to get a laser.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we were passively aiming, because we had night vision, but we didn't have lasers, and so we would passively aim with our red dots on our freaking rifles because we needed to be able to still see shit and hit it. And then it grew into this whole thing about, well, our enemies, our near peers, have night vision. Have anybody looked at the pictures from the dudes getting murked over in freaking in Russia right now, or in Ukraine right now? Because outside of promotional videos that these Russians and the freaking, you know, Chinese and stuff like to freaking put up, I've seen a whole lot of dudes dead on the side of the road with no base plates on their helmets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I would love to know how every one of our enemies has night vision. And so if you turn a laser on, you're going to die. You know, not to mention, you guys remember, what do we have? Laser discipline.
Oh yeah,
we had light discipline.
It's treated just like a negligent discharge with your firearm, setting your laser off. You know, so.
But did that mean that we didn't use them?
No. Yeah, we used them when we were shooting.
Right. We expected that our enemy might be able to see us. But if he can see my laser, that means I'm kinetic as fuck right now. And I don't give a shit he can see me because I'm shooting his ass.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, where is this world where I need to be so fucking secretive and so hidden that I can't turn lasers on?
Yeah.
And because all my enemies have freaking night vision and they could possibly see me. So, like, when I see these these people say this shit, it was like, first of all, you missed the point. The whole point was, if you have an optic that goes to 1 power, why are you all feeling the need to put another 1 power optic on top of it? That was the point. The next point was, I don't think the LPVO is a very good class of optic. That doesn't mean that I don't have them. That doesn't mean I don't use them, because you know what? There's a specific use case for why an LPVO is necessary. But you have to understand that it's a compromise. It's not a very good class of optic in the true grand scheme of things, because it's not a good CCO and it's not a good high-powered magnified optic.
Right.
But people try to treat them as if they are.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And this all derived because I had just left teaching a course where I had some students with LPVOs, and some did good, some didn't do good. And of course, when we have students, some do good, some don't do good, with no matter what the equipment is. But the real struggle was when the students with LPVOs try to engage targets at longer distances.
Yeah.
Now, everybody's going to probably think, oh, yeah, of course. Well, it's not a high-powered magnified optic. Well, then why are you trying to do freaking high-powered magnified optic shit with it?
Yeah.
Yep.
You know? Like, it's made for shooting minute of man on intermediate targets.
Mm-hmm.
So why are you trying to shoot small targets at 800 yards?
Right. That's
not what it's made for. You can do it if you've got the right skill sets and you're willing to put enough rounds downrange. Sure, you can do it. That's not what it's made for. You know, so quit acting like that's what it's made for. And that's what people do all the time. They want to freaking buy one piece of equipment and act like it's the best thing that they've ever had.
Yeah.
And it can do every job. And it's like, it can't. It's not meant for that. The people it's designed for had a specific use case, and they were willing to accept the compromise.
Yep.
Yeah.
But people don't like to be told that.
Yeah.
And so that's where I got myself into trouble.
Well, I think you're pretty much spot on. I mean, as more time's gone on and the more Steven and I build guns and test guns and and our wheelhouse is very much more towards like your I guess general purpose rifle or your multi-purpose rifle or maybe even special purpose rifles a little bit. It's that LPVO or that 1-6, 1-8, whatever it is definitely a compromise. It's not great at being a close quarters optic at all. It's not good at being a long distance optic. And the more time has gone on and the more we've shot and got trigger time on them, they're not really good at being that. They're not even that good at being just a medium range optic. It's like you can get something like a 2-10 or like I just got the 3.6 to 18 Mark V, and that thing just absolutely blows the pants off of any 1-8 or any 1-6 that I've ever used. I mean, it's not even, you can't even put them in the same conversation. And the funny thing is that 3.6 power is so forgiving that you can still use it in like a close range, just for fun. I used that setup on like a more competition style course of fire. I was like, I'm curious how I'll do with it. And
close range
smoked
stuff
it.
too.
It was all close range. It was all within, all within 50 yards and smoked it. And I was like, dang, that's with a 3.6 to 18 power. And as far as the, the piggyback optic, cause I personally, I do think that, being capable of passive engagement is important. I think you should understand how to do it. I think there's a lot of confusion in that alone. Like a lot of people don't realize you can just shoot occluded and keep your nods on your left side and you can actually make some pretty good hits, and it's actually easier than swinging them over, and people are always like, wait, what? My brain, and it's like, dude, that's super old school. That's
oh yeah, I remember the first time I realized you could do it.
Yeah,
like I remember looking through my PVS 14 that was on my left eye, and I looked through my red dot and I was like, wait a second.
Yeah.
I can see at night and I can see through my optic, and like it transposed onto my target.
Yep.
Like, what?
Yeah, you got like a red dot in your green phosphorus tube, and you're wait, how is that working right now?
yeah.
So I think
dude, if you tell you right now, we shot a shit ton of dogs in Iraq with those things.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I think if you piggyback and you've got it for that role, I think there's some validity to it. But I agree with what you're saying, where it's like I think people are.
If you got it there, it's still a 1-power optic, regardless.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
like, why are you making the?
It's not just for nighttime. You can use it during the day. You can use it.
Yeah.
It's there. You use it for everything. So you might as well upgrade your
magnification.
Scope.
Yeah.
And
look, and I don't want to tell anybody that they shouldn't have anything that they want that they can purchase. Like, buy it. If you have a reason for why you want it, buy it.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with it. Understand what it is. Understand what you're doing. Don't make up some fucking story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like, don't make us some story to justify why it is. And then when I come through or somebody else comes through and says, hey, that's actually got its limitations. You go, well, no, it doesn't, because this is why I wanted it. Like,
yeah.
Why you wanted it doesn't have any matter or bearing on the conversation.
Yeah.
And look, I understand a 3x6, 3.6 to 18 is not a great low power optic.
Yeah.
Great. Never said it was.
Exactly. Yeah.
Never said it was. Could it be used as one? Sure. It's going to be very limited. Would a 1x8 be better at low power than a 3.5 to 18? Yes. But you know what? A 3.5 to 18 on 8 power is going to be far better than a 1x8 on 8 power.
It's crazy how
that's
good
a fact.
Yeah.
And a CCO is going to be 100 times better than a 1x8 on 1 power. Now, is a CCO going to be good at freaking 400 yards? No.
Yeah.
But does that mean a 1x8 is instantly the best optic on the planet because you now have 8 power? No. But people don't understand that, they just they can't grasp that. And I'm like, hey, if you got to have a one gun solution, then a 1x8 makes a lot of sense, guys. There's no problem with that. Nobody said that it didn't. There was no issue there.
Mm-hmm.
My comment was the LPVO is not a great class of optic. It's a compromise because it limits your ability to do the low end and it limits your ability to do the high end, which is exactly what that optic's supposed to be able to do.
Yeah.
Right.
And then if you have something that's already built for low end and you put a low end optic on top of it, it seems kind of repugnant.
Yeah.
And that blew the internet up.
Yeah. Well, I think it's valid, and I think it's something that people should start thinking more about. Like, if you're already planning on going, with some kind of optics package because you want to have the ability to passively aim, because you do have night vision, list goes on and on and on, which, as that modern Minuteman, if you will, you should probably be heading in that direction. But you can really start to think about, like, well, do I need 1 to whatever? No, I can probably start looking at
2 to 10.
Yeah,
that's what I love about the 2 to 10 is it's still not such a big optic. Like, you got a lightweight optic on there, and it still has more capability than like a 1 to 6 or 1 to 8.
Yeah, way
you know
more.
what I'd like to see? The 2 to 10 does answer this question a lot. Because I agree, I think the 2 to 10 is a fantastic optical. I really like it. I actually had one of my buddies in the course was shooting my 2 to 10 on my rifle, and then we had another student with the Night Force 1 to 8. I'd like to see more of the LPVO manufacturing community start to put some of the features that like the 2 to 10 have in it, because I think that, and that's maybe where the conversation was lost, and we had those conversations in the comments when when I actually was talking to people, but it was like, okay, hey, you can make a 1x8 a whole lot better optic. It doesn't have to be as bad of an optic as it actually is. The problem is they don't want to do that. If I put a parallax adjustment on a 1 to 8, I can fix my parallax issues.
Yeah.
If I wanted to put a 0 stop on the turret, then I could actually have a turret that I could adjust for those precision aiming needs. The problem with like the Night Force is when that guy does need to take a precision shot and he doesn't want to just hold off into freaking Never Land for his wind hold because the dots are all a freaking mil apart and he's already holding 6 freaking mils of elevation. And so now he's just off in the middle of nowhere trying to hold wind on a freaking small ass target. So he's like, hey, I want to dial my turret. Well, he's got a 0 stop to return to. But the Night Force, you can't do that. There's no 0 stop. Where like on Loophole 2 to 10, it's got a traditional turret. So yeah, I could hold it if I wanted to. I could hold everything if I wanted to with that optic. Now, granted, we need better reticles in that scope, but I could hold everything if I wanted to, or I could dial. And then when I'm done dialing, I got a 0 stop to return back to 0, because that was one of the problems that guy had is he didn't have a 0 stop. So when he dialed and then he moved on to his next target and dialed again and then moved on to his third target, he didn't know where he was on his turret anymore. And he wasn't a seasoned enough shooter to have that discipline of I dial up, I go back to 0. I dial up, I go back to 0. I dial up, I go back to 0.
Right.
And so the next thing you know, we had no idea where he was in his turret.
Dang. That's tough. Yeah. No, that 0 stop is so, it makes a world of difference. Just crank it back down, it's going to lock off at 0 and you're good to go. So
yeah,
I don't know how you do it without it, honestly.
So yeah, 0 stops, parallax knobs, those are 2 easy things that you could do to a 1 to 8, a 1 to 6, 1 to 10 that would dramatically make them better scopes. And then I think another limitation of those scopes is they have such big magnification ranges. 1 to 10, 1 to 8. That's an 8 power magnifier. It's a 10 power magnifier. So you're going to have very large optical distortion between those magnification ranges. And so that's one thing that 2 to 10 does very well is it only has a 5 power magnifier. So you have a whole lot less optical distortion. That's why your original 1 to 4s and 1 to 6s were a lot better scopes than these current LPVOs.
Yeah.
The problem was they didn't give the people the magnification they needed. So people wanted more magnification. They got it, but they got the downsides.
Yeah.
Okay. And what people don't understand is the optic manufacturers, they're going to build you what you want. Okay. And they're going to do it. There's certain things they can do to give you what you want and not make themselves look bad. So then things that they'll do is like when you had that huge optical distortion, it starts to appear initially around the edges of the glass.
Mm-hmm.
So what they'll do is they'll actually have like I think it's called like a diopter, that when you magnify up, the diopter will come in and block off the edges of the glass.
Oh.
And so it actually restricts field of view, but it also blocks off the edges of the glass. And so now when you look in there, you're like, oh, edge to edge clarity is still beautiful on 10 power, still beautiful on 8 power, or whatever it is. Well, no, it's not. You just can't see from edge to edge, truly.
Oh, dang. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's true in high power and low power magnified optics. Not all of them, but certain ones do that.
I want to get into scopes a little more specifically because I think that's an important conversation. But I guess finishing the build, you were kind of talking about. Well, I think were you about to get into scopes, and then you said you kind of got yourself in trouble, and then we went down that rabbit trail for a while. But what? So if you're, where were we? You remember? We were talking about
scopes. Yeah,
we're talking about your purpose. So like what you're trying to do. You were saying balance, and then getting into like right tool for the right job.
Yeah.
So
I mean that's the biggest thing is balance, right tool for the right job. I mean in a lot of ways those things kind of go together, right? Different mindset, but balancing your rifle, right tool, right job.
Yeah.
So obviously one I was talking about physically balancing your rifle, and the other one was balancing your mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that kind of goes into the one thing we were talking about with the hunters. They want to pick what they think is the right tool for the right job. Is not always the right tool for the right job. And that's something we see in the precision shooting world all the time too, even the carbine shooting world. People will buy the next trend, the next fad, or hey, as a hunter, I buy the biggest cartridge because that's got the best knockdown power. I got to kill this animal, so I need this much kinetic energy. I need this much foot pounds. I need this much calibers. I need whatever it is, and they don't actually understand the really what it comes down to is the mathematics behind it, but they don't understand really they don't understand the right tool, right job. And I think that comes from a lot of just old dogma, the old dudes who would pull a rifle out one time a year and shoot at a pie plate, and once they hit it, they'd be like, I'm ready to go hunting. And I think it comes from a lot of our dads and grandpas that the only rifle there ever was one Teddy Roosevelt took over to Africa and killed freaking rhinos with, and that's God bless 30-06, and or whatever, and so that if it's not a belted Magnum, you can't kill anything above freaking whitetail deer with it. So there's all these things, there's all these limitations that people put in, there's all these like I said, dogma that people have, and it limits their abilities and it limits their understanding. And really, it's just a mindset thing that they're putting blinders on themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we need to go kill freaking moose with 223s, because that would probably not turn out the greatest. Although you could do it, but using the right tool for the right job. Understanding the application, understanding your equipment is hugely important. Understanding, not necessarily so nuanced into ballistics that you could teach a class to a freaking you could teach a college course in ballistics, but understanding like the performance of your round and what it's capable of and where it's going to be at in time and space, that's huge, because we get people all the time that they couldn't fathom shooting at something past 200 yards or 100 yards for that matter. My father-in-law, when I started hunting with him, the longest shot that anybody he knew had hunted with was 200 yards. And when I was talking about coming out and hunting and, hey, I want to be put in the stand where I can see 300 yards or more, they were like, we don't have one of those and that'll never happen. And I'm like, why not? And they're like,
it's inhumane.
Yeah, it's inhumane. Nobody does that. And I was like, my marksmanship qual is to 300 meters.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't I be able to kill a deer with this freaking, large rifle caliber, out to freaking 400? I don't understand this. I'm a sniper. I just qualified to freaking 1,000 meters, with a 308. Why couldn't I kill a deer at 500?
Yeah.
And so, but they didn't understand where their bullet would be at in time and space. And now, I've got my father-in-law, he's got a really nice, still lightweight, but really nice precision rifle that he takes hunting that he also come out with me and shoot 1,000 yards with. Nice. And so, when he has that freaking deer that pops up at 250, he doesn't worry about whether or not he can kill it. He's thinking about what part of the animal am I going to specifically put this bullet into?
Yeah.
And when you can think like that, then your opportunities are greatly increased, and so that's been a big thing for us is we get a lot of students who are hunters. We get a lot of students who are big game hunters who travel, because when they go out to freaking Alaska and when they go out to Montana or they go to freaking Tajikistan to kill a freaking Marco Polo, and they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on that hunt, they don't want to leave empty-handed.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And guaranteeing that they're going to be within 100 yards to kill that thing with a freaking, 45-50 or whatever that thing is called, like that's not a guarantee, So that dude's got to be able to freaking know where his bullet's going to be at in time and space, understand what the wind's doing in that terrain, or 45-70, I should say. But yeah, knowing what the wind's doing in that terrain, and understand that animal is obliquing away from him, and be able to put that round in vitals.
Yep. Yeah, that's it's definitely a huge misconception up here for sure. I mean, I'm sure you can imagine, but there's definitely a lot of old timers and it's just the way we do it, kind of mindset up here. But
gotta have a 3.381 mag or whatever,
Yeah.
It's like,
well, look, it works to an extent, but I can tell you from hunting for the little bit of time that I've been hunting, comparatively speaking to the old timers I hunt with, they've lost a lot more animals than, there's been a lot of wounded animals or a lot of animals that were not recovered because of that mindset. And I'm not saying they're doing bad things, but I'm just saying that like that mindset has lost to a lot of animals that were never recovered.
Yeah.
And accidents happen, and not every animal you shoot you're going to bring home, because shit does happen, but you can be a lot more successful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
So as far as I guess kind of continuing that mindset of right tool for the right job, because this next question is going to definitely, I think, fall into that category. But we get asked it a lot, so I wanted to ask you, if you were going to set up a platform for kind of, I don't want to say multi-use, but a more precision-focused platform, going over all the things that you just talked about, being balanced, having some magnification so you can really stretch the legs on it. Calibers and stuff is a whole other thing, but we get asked a lot about bolt gun versus gas gun. Where do you land on that?
So I'm a gas gun guy because I'm coming from the military. Like that's what I spent the majority of my time on. Mm-hmm. That's where my heart lies, is gas guns. But big caveat here, if I really, really wanted to eke out the most amount of precision and performance, it's going to be a bolt gun. Just simply because you're minimizing reciprocating parts. You're it's a lot simpler system. And so you can actorize it a lot easier. That doesn't mean that gas guns couldn't be as accurate, but typically they're not, or as precise, I should say. So a lot of times, right tool, right job, right? But you know, I prefer a gas gun. It's what I'm the most comfortable on. But if I'm going to go shooting in competition, I'm probably taking a bolt gun.
Okay. But for that kind of, I guess, more like the thing basically what you're saying is the thing you're most comfortable with grabbing that's going to give you kind of more versatile capabilities is probably going to be a gas gun.
Yeah. If I had to pick a one gun solution, or if I had to do my shit hits the fan rifle, or whatever, it's going to be a gas gun.
Yeah.
It's going to be. It's the one I can shoot and move with the easiest. I can carry the most rounds. I can put the most rounds on target the quickest with. I can shoot plenty far with them. I can have, I can still have large calibers, small calibers. I have a lot of versatility there. I think it's a far more versatile rifle than a bolt gun. But if I had to eke out every last bit of freaking precision, it's gonna be a bolt gun for me.
Yeah. I guess kind of jumping into kind of the caveat on that. What's a good? You've mentioned Night Force, Loophole. You've been talking about a couple different magnifications and different things like that. Obviously, LPVO's not a fan. But what's a good?
No, like I said, right tool, right job. I mean, if I had to have a one gun solution, I would probably have. I've become a real big fan of the 2-10 lately.
Yeah.
But I probably would have still had an LPVO if I needed a one gun solution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, finish your question.
Oh, I was just going to say, what are things you're looking for overall in scopes?
So, and I'll actually take this one back to why we chose the Loophole Mark V for the Mark 22 sniper rifle. And that is, so optical clarity is hugely important, although most people don't know how to quantify it. So I can ask 10 different people what's a good scope and get 10 different answers because 9 of them don't know what the hell they're talking about. And also, when I look through a scope, what looks good to me could very well look different to you. And that has to do with coatings, typically, that are on the glass. So that's one. So optical clarity obviously is going to be important. Some optics you look through, you can just tell like this looks like dog shit, just right off the bat. So the next thing is going to be features. I'm going to like locking turrets. I'm probably going to want a capped windage. And I'm going to I like a power throw lever. I think if a scope doesn't come with a power throw lever these days, it's like, that's just dumb. Or at least say it's an option, I really don't pay attention to field of view anymore these days because I find that, like, how do I quantify field of view?
Right.
Like most people, I mean, yes, I can look at the manual and tell you, well, oh, this has got so many yards of field of view, but like, I don't know. I usually just use whatever magnification I need to be able to see the target I need, whether that gives me a large field of view or a small field of view. So, that's not really a big thing for me. Eye relief is huge, and this is where I go back to the Mark 22. That was one of the reasons we chose the Mark 5 was favorable eye relief in low power magnification and high power magnification.
Yeah.
And realizing that your eye box does change based off of the magnification range, and so some optics become very, very restrictive in high power, and you would think that typically it's going to be, it has to be favorable and low, and it has to be more restrictive and high. And sometimes some scopes go through this weird, and it's part of that diopter thing I was talking about, where I'll be good and low, and then I get better, or then I get worse, or I get better, and then get worse again. And so there's some scopes, and you'll see them typically in a scope that has like a really large magnification range, or some of your lower power scopes, where like, hey, this thing always just seems like I'm struggling to find my proper eye relief. that's probably what you're seeing is a scope that has like one of those weird diopters. It has a very large magnification range, and it's got a very, very like tight eye box. So I look for something that's got a very favorable and a large window for eye relief. Okay. Because honestly, when you zero a rifle, you're probably going to set it on high magnification, zero it in the prone. And then when you go out and shoot it on any course of fire or in a hunting scenario, you're going to be in a lot lower magnification, and you're probably not going to be laying in the prone anymore. And so I want to make sure that I have proper eye relief no matter what position and no matter what magnification I'm in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then locking turrets and elevation travel is huge. So I don't want to run out of a turret travel, or elevation travel.
Yeah.
When I'm dialing up for any kind of engagement that I'm going to need to make. Now, obviously, if I'm shooting a 223 and I'm trying to take it to 1,500 yards, I'm probably going to run out of my fucking elevation.
Yeah.
But especially out of a 16-inch gas gun. But and that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But this goes back to the Mark 22 testing. We saw some scopes that, said they had 30 mils of elevation travel. And the question I asked, that I had to decide was, well, what does 30 mils mean? Does that mean from literally the bottom of the scope elevation travel to the top of the scope elevation travel? Or does that mean from where it's zeroed?
Yeah.
Because those are not the same thing.
Right.
And, does it mean from factory 0 to the top and factory 0 to the bottom? Because when I put this thing on factory 0 and it might only have 28 mils of elevation travel. But then when I put it on a 10 MOA base, I just got elevation travel back.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, that's kind of one of those important things. So for me, biggest thing is the features it's going to have, the eye relief, and then elevation travel. Those are kind of big things I look at.
And then as far as the focal plane, I'm guessing you're primarily using first.
I don't understand why anybody's using second in the 21st century.
Right. Yeah. As soon as you talked about, backing off your magnification to where you can see the target the best, I was like, well, that's definitely first focal plane. So yeah.
Yeah. There's almost no use case where a second focal plane is going to make sense. I'm sure maybe some of your listeners can come up with a specific scenario, but I can't think of it.
Yeah. I think the only time to me it really makes, I guess, sense or more for simplicity would be in like a 1-6, something super.
And just so you can see the reticle
exactly.
in that low power easier. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But then again, that's why a lot of the manufacturers now offer like the donut as part of their Christmas tree reticle. So when you go into that low power, you still got a dot, but when you go up here in high power, you've got your Christmas tree reticle back.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, some people say with the first focal plane, it's like covers too much of your target, but as long as you know to just dial it back, then it's like, it's solved at that point.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've heard people complain about that, and I'm always kind of just like, well, then just
back it off.
Off. You're
talking about the reticle.
And that goes to that compromise conversation that people don't want to admit, right? So like, hey, that first focal plane, I'm either going to have a reticle that's usable at low power, or I'm going to have a reticle that's usable at high power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Especially in an LPVO. I can't have both.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if I get one that's usable in low power, it'd be way too thick at high power.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa. It's the reason why 3-18 is not a good low power scope. The reticle just almost virtually disappears at 3.5. I mean, you can see it, but like imagine holding elevation at 3.6 power. Like you couldn't. I mean, you might be able to hold individual mils, but you couldn't hold tenths of mils.
Oh no, definitely not.
Even individual mils would be freaking murderous.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It hurts my brain thinking about that.
So obviously, you're a big fan of Leupold optics. Sounds like you use them a lot. we're also huge fans of Leupold. I love Leupold. I've used it forever since the military days. Being a DM, I had a Mark IV, and learned on it. I actually had one of the old ones that was mixed, so it was Mil-Iridian reticle and MOA adjustments,
MOA turrets,
which is trash, but it was still such a good little optic. But I'm curious, and I don't, not necessarily get too brand specific, but you start really looking at like what the professionals are using, and people that are really into whether it's competition or just overall precision shooting. A lot of people using Leupold. But I'm curious if you see this. We definitely do. Where do you think a lot of the hate for Leupold comes from? Because you look at their optics and what they're doing and what their capabilities are, and people are still trying to make other optics work. I'm not saying they won't, but
yeah, well, and yeah, I mean, I want to be very clear up front. There, I people probably think I'm talking bad on Night Force, and don't get me wrong, Night Force makes some incredible optics.
Yeah.
I've owned a couple. I own one now because I do own one of their 1.8s, and I own two Zeisses and a handful of other scopes. But yeah, so there's two things I think. One, when you're one of the oldest scope companies on the market, you've garnered many decades worth of hate. Okay, so that's one thing.
Yeah.
They've had a long time to build reputation, both good and bad. So there's that. Two, I feel like they held on to the Mark IV line of scope for too long.
Okay.
I think they did a big disservice to them. I told them right to their president's face inside of their warehouse or inside of their manufacturing plant. I specifically told them that because the problem with the Mark IV line, especially on the military side of things, or really any scope line, you think about it. Your nods. Your nods get freaking broken or need servicing or whatever. You send them to, you give him to your armor. He does his level of maintenance that he can do. If he can't do anything with them, he sends them to the next level, 30 shop or the 3 shop. And then they freaking purge them. They can do almost everything to a set of freaking PVS 14s, damn near, except maybe replacing lenses, but they can do a lot of shit. And then there's even another level, usually at division level, where it's, maybe they'll have somebody who can do a higher level of maintenance to a set of PVS 14s, right? When it comes time to do that on a freaking scope, there's no maintenance. There's no maintenance plan whatsoever. It's wipe the thing down and check it for serviceability. That's it. There's no maintenance plan whatsoever. If it breaks, send it back. We'll give you a new one. And so people start to think that, hey, all we do is break these things, and then they have to send us a new one, and then we'll break another one, and then they send us a new one. Like, why are these things always breaking? Like, why can nobody fix them? Like, are they all broken that badly that like they're useless and we have to throw them away? And so like I talked to these guys and I said, why is there no service plan for a freaking scope? We have them for red dots. We have them for night vision. We have them for almost everything else in our inventory. But when it comes time for our scopes on our precision rifles, there's no maintenance plan. We can service everything else on this rifle except our scopes. I don't understand it. It's a mechanical piece of equipment. Why can't we service it? And they couldn't answer that question, other than to say that there was no service plan. It wasn't built into the contract. And I'm like, well, for you guys, you think you're doing due diligence to the soldier by just giving him a new one. But to the soldier and to everybody else on the market, all they see is loopholes breaking.
Right.
If I could send it to my armor and he puts a new freaking scope cap on it and then gives it back to me, I'd be like, okay, it's not a bad piece of equipment. It just, it's just like changing a pair of tires.
Yeah.
Every so often you got to do some maintenance.
Right.
Big deal. But I still had the same 10-year-old scope. But instead, and what really the Army did, which kind of screwed things over, is, yeah, thing's broken, but we don't have any money to replace it, or we don't know how to replace it. That was a big one. We don't know how to send this thing in to get it fixed. And so guys just sat there with broken scopes or scopes that didn't track or whatever. And so like guys just thought that Leupold sucked. And it's like, no, man, those Leupolds were great when they came out.
Yeah.
You also held on to it for 15 years.
Yeah.
Like that's 15-year-old technology.
Right.
I mean, what's the rate of advancement in the optic world right now? Like, of course, that 15-year-old scope seems like it sucks.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I told him, I was like, I hope you guys don't do that with the Mark V. Like, if in a decade we're still talking about Mark Vs, you guys have failed.
Yeah. Yeah, the Mark V does seem so the Mark V is user serviceable for pretty much, right? Like you can change, I know you can change turrets and different things like that. I don't know how far you can really go, but
well, I mean, that's really about all you can do is change turrets.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's just something that we see a lot up here. There's a huge market for, or I guess there's a huge market support or people that brand support for Vortex up here. Like Vortex is viewed as like the holy grail of scopes, and we always recommend Leupold, and people are like, what? Like, well, have you looked into Vortex? That's like, yeah, dude. I mean, yeah, we've owned and ran Vortexes before.
So Leupold or Vortex is very good at marketing.
They definitely are.
Marketing.
Yeah.
I heard another guy that you know, one of the things he said, I won't say who it was, but he said that Vortex is a marketing company that makes optics. Instead of an optic company that has a marketing department or something like that, you know. And I was like, you know what? He's absolutely right.
Yeah,
like they're very good at marketing. Like when the number one thing that you say about a Vortex is that it has a great warranty.
Yeah,
that doesn't tell me that it's a good optic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that I necessarily think Vortexes are bad. It's just like the first thing you have to say to me is how good their warranty is. Like, I don't want to talk about it. And the truth of the matter is, almost every manufacturer has a similar warranty.
Yeah.
You know, like outside of like just straight abuse, like and neglect, and like you did something on purpose, which apparently it seems like Vortex will let you get away with. I don't know. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But like it seems like if you told Vortex, hey, I took it outside and I whacked it on a brick and it broke. And so now I'm sending it back. And they're like, oh, sweet, we'll send you a new one. You know, if you told Leupold that, they might probably tell you to pound sand.
Yeah.
You know, but if you told Leupold, like, hey, dude, I was on a once in a lifetime doll sheep hunt in Alaska. You guys have doll sheep, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to say the wrong thing. But yeah, I was on a freaking once in a lifetime sheep hunt in Alaska, and my rifle tipped over and fell freaking 10 feet down a cliff, and it broke. They'd probably be like, sweet, you got pics? Like, we want to see the freaking sheep you killed.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, send it back, we'll fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think Trigicon, Night Force, Leupold, obviously, all these companies have, lifetime warranties. I mean, I've had to work with Leupold's warranty stuff, not even for a scope, it was for rings. I had rings that showed up and didn't come with, they were missing some screws, and it was like the easiest thing ever. He's like, yep, oh, sorry to hear that. Boom, next day air, here's your screws. Like, next day aired me, so the shipping alone was way more than what the screws cost.
Yeah.
And next day aired me up in Alaska, like a whole fresh set of screws, and I didn't have to pay a dime. You know?
I think we pretty much dealt with
amazing.
everyone at this point. Vortex, Night Force, Leupold. So they've all been good.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
as far as warranties.
It's also funny too when people, they have no idea where their scopes come from and all that stuff, and it's like, yeah, there's really actually only let me think about this. I think there's only like one American scope company, like one company that actually truthfully makes scopes in America. Like, yeah, Vortex assembles scopes in America. Knife Force assembles scopes in America. Like there's a lot of companies that assemble scopes in America. Like, dude, go tour the factory in freaking in Beaverton, Oregon, and watch them take a freaking block of steel and turn it into a scope tube and then make you dials and everything else. Like, the only thing they don't make there is the freaking glass. And you know what? That's because nobody does. Nobody makes the glass in America. There was that one like line of freaking scopes from Vortex for a very short period of time, but like that's just because we don't make glass like that in America.
Yeah.
Germany and Japan and China and like the Philippines. That's like all the places you can get glass made.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you. So if someone's trying to get into obviously competition shooting, that's a kind of where you can kind of test your skills a little bit, compare them up against other people. If someone's trying to first get into it, like what kind of tools other than the gun, since we've kind of covered the gun, like how you should build out your gun, what kind of tools should they get along with that? We could maybe cover like bare minimum kind of budget versus like, hey, I don't really have a budget, I just want to go in prepared.
Yeah, so I mean so my opinion on that's changing because more companies are coming into this arena and more equipment's coming to the market.
Yeah.
Garmin's coming in a big way. And so they've been offering their ballistic watches and their, wrist top computers and stuff like that. And so where it used to be before, you either had a phone app, which was very limited, or you had a Kestrel.
Yeah.
Now you can get into a lot of the Garmin devices and they can give you everything a Kestrel can do minus the impeller that freaking will spin for wind, and even then, if you know anything about that, like that's still only wind at your location.
Yeah.
So it still only is part of the equation and it's not necessarily accurate for what you're going to see downrange. So like that feature is cool and all, but that feature really comes out of like the sailboat community, like needing to know what the wind is doing at my location because I need it to move my freaking boat around the water.
Yeah.
For shooting community, that's a very like marginally useful thing. But the ballistic engine that's in there, and the temperature sensors and stuff like that, that's important stuff. But I can do that in a Garmin watch. So I that's what I'm saying. My opinions are changing. But I would look for some type of ballistic solver, whether it be app-based, watch-based, or Kestrel-based. That's pretty much a necessity these days. It's going to save you a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of wasted ammo. People are going to see those initial investments and think that they're a lot and not know why it's important, and then be like, well, I can get so many more bullets if I didn't buy one of those. But it's going to save you a lot of bullets from buying one of those. So it goes back to that. Where's my bullet at where's my bullet at in time and space?
Yeah.
A ballistic solver, a ballistic engine will help you figure that out. And that's really important. Next thing, obviously, is their rifle. I think that there's some really, really, really good factory options these days. And so I would highly recommend that people buy one of those factory options before they ever dip their toe into building a precision rifle from a custom precision rifle. Because the fact of the matter is until their skill sets are far, far better than they probably are, you're never going to see any difference. And like I said, there's actually some really, really good factory options out there these days that I think put in the right hands could be, world-class shooters could use them and still win world titles. Yeah. So, so like honestly, I just did a review on the Sig Cross PRS rifle. It's a really good rifle. It's a good price. It's, really fair as far as that's concerned. It gives you every feature you would need in a precision rifle. And it shoots pretty dang good. I think it's perfect. No, but they really did their job did the research on it and gave you the right set of features. It balances amazingly. It's not overly bulky. It's not super heavy. But they really thought about what features they were going to give you and why. And that probably comes from the guys that are on their shooting team. They have some really, really good shooters that, come from the right communities and make sure they produced a good rifle.
Yeah.
The Daniel Defense rifle is not a bad rifle. Their new, the one that comes in the chassis. I think the action's terrible. Like it feels like absolute garbage. But the gun shoots good, and the features of the gun are pretty good. I just don't like the action.
Yeah.
But from a shooting standpoint and feature standpoint, it's a good rifle. And anybody who bought it would be okay, especially from the beginning standpoint. And then you have some things like this, a couple of the Seekins hit rifles are really, really nice rifles. So from the precision bolt action world, you'd be really good there. If you wanted to get in precision gas gun world, Seekins once again makes an amazing gas gun. Their SP10s and SP15s are really good rifles. Daniel Defense makes some pretty decent semi-auto kind of more precision rifles that are do pretty good. And then you have some other really kind of Gucci things out there that you could get into too, but I don't even think they're necessary. I mean, honestly, get yourself a Seekins SP10 or an SP15, and you almost can't do better than that.
Okay. So you don't need to go crazy and find like the rare SR25 and go that whole route.
Well, and most people will tell you that the SR25 is not incredibly accurate.
Yeah.
No, I mean, they're good guns. Don't get me wrong. I mean, definitely battle proven, something you could take and freaking to the end of the world, probably, but they're not like exceptionally accurate guns.
Yeah.
And they definitely don't have like all the best features.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts on like the LaRue OBRs and stuff like that?
I think they're a decade behind.
There you go. Sweet.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I guess I know we probably got to start wrapping up here pretty soon, but I know that something you mentioned before we started, we were talking a little bit about ammunition. How important is ammunition to this whole equation?
So it's obviously just one part of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
It has a lot to do with your consistency. Obviously, consistency equals accuracy, and so your number one thing with ammo is you want to make sure that you have something that is very consistent. It's part of the equation because your gun's got to like it, and every gun responds differently to every type of ammo. And you could get two SP10s firing the same ammunition, and they're going to respond differently. It's just kind of the nature of things. But I think most of your factory ammo these days is pretty good ammunition. And honestly, most people are not going to outshoot it. Most people. Keywords there.
Yeah.
But, if you've got factory match grade ammo from a reputable company, it's probably going to do you good. Throw it in your gun, put it across a chrono. Does it give you respectable numbers? Does it print respectable groups? Carry on and train. We carry a lot of Norma ammo here because I think it's the best bang for the buck that we've seen. I sell 175 308 ammo, which is obviously super popular, for $26 to $27 a box. That's a great price for match grade ammunition. So, federal gold medal match 175 grain is still the gold standard. A couple more dollars a box typically. That's good ammo. Yeah. You can get up into Gucci stuff like Burger and maybe get a little bit better performance. Hornady obviously still produces pretty good ammunition most of the time, although I've seen some pretty wazoo lots coming from them. But it's crazy. I mean, I'll get a lot from them that's like, oh my god, this is factory ammunition. Like, how did they do this? This is amazing. And then you get another lot and you're like, did my freaking 5-year-old crunch this stuff? Like, what the hell's going on? Like, this was made on a Friday for sure. You know? Like,
Yeah. That's hilarious. Yeah, no, just manufacturing inconsistencies can kill you for sure. It's a bummer that happens, but definitely does, especially with some bigger companies. Well, I guess kind of tying this all together, what are some tips you'd give for training, actually applying this stuff, actually taking all these things, putting them together and doing what actually matters and getting good at it?
Yeah. So get zeroed, get your data for your gun, and then get off your stomach. Shoot in the scenarios that you would shoot on a regular basis. And if you want to quantify that training is actual worthwhile training, put paper up and shoot those scenarios. So one of the things that we like to do is the craft drill is designed by a buddy of mine. I think it's derived from some other drill back in the day, but essentially what he did was he created a diamond bullseye essentially, and that was all, each ring was 1 inch bigger, and he made it a 4-positional drill. So it was standing, kneeling, seated, prone. He shot 12 rounds, so 3 rounds from each position. So standing 1 shot, kneeling 1 shot, seated 1 shot, prone 1 shot, and then he got up and he did it again. And he did that, 4 times or whatever. And what that was supposed to do, and I think it does a good job of, is show you as a whole shooter. Because anybody can typically lay in the prone and print nice tight groups. That's not hard to do, but that's also not representative of you, like shooting in the scenarios that you'd actually shoot in. So, if you know that, hey, I'm going to only hunt deer from a blind, sitting in a chair out the window, well, then that's how you should be shooting. Not laying in the prone in on a 100-yard range.
Yeah.
So, set those scenarios up for the type of shooting that you'll be doing. So I think that's really important.
Sweet. Do you think it's important to go, I guess what kind of chronological order would you say would be important? Obviously, go learn from somebody, go learn from a professional, someone like yourself. Like you go to CR2 Shooting Solutions and take a class, and then follow on with what you've learned and kind of implement that homework, and then go take another class.
This is probably not a good sales pitch, but truthfully, everything that you want to learn, you could learn on the internet. Now, that's not going to teach you great application necessarily, and that's where good instructors come in, because they're gonna teach you that nuance. They're gonna give you that context. So I do think getting professional instruction is important. If you need information can be garnered from the internet. So yeah, go get a little bit of instruction. Have a professional look at your shooting, the way you're shooting. Give you those pointers that you're not going to be able to see because they're giving you a fresh pair of eyes looking at you in a way that you can't see yourself.
Yeah.
And then, go out there and practice, get those rounds down range. But one thing that I learned from a buddy of mine, is, have an actual plan. Don't just go to the range and shoot rounds. The way he said he looks at every range session as like a training session at the gym. You don't just go to the gym and then just start picking up weights and putting them down.
Yeah.
You go to the gym with a plan. Like, hey, today I'm gonna work chest or buys and tries or whatever. You usually go with a routine. And the people who take weightlifting serious or exercise serious go not only with a routine, but they warm up. They do, calisthenics. They do big muscle movements. They do cool downs. Okay. And he said, treat shooting the same way. Go there with a mindset of what you're going to do. Warm up with dry fires. Then shoot skill building isolated drills, and then go into your big muscle movements, shooting over distance, working on wind calls, things like that, and then cool it down. Bring it back in to 100 or whatever you need to do. But don't just, what a lot of people will do is they'll show up to the range and they immediately want to go to distance. Or what they'll do is they'll shoot a quick group at 100. Yep, my rifle's still zeroed, and then I'm going straight to distance. Especially when they're going to distance on steel. Steel lies. Steel doesn't tell you that, hey, you're 3 inches up and to the left.
Right.
Hey, a hit's a hit. Most people aren't aware enough to realize that, hey, that target's wiggling left and right because you hit it off center. Mm-hmm. You meant to hit it in the center, but you didn't. So why did you miss? You still hit it, but you didn't miss you didn't hit it where you meant to, so you missed.
Right.
And that's important. That's important feedback.
Yeah.
So, but when you go into it with that mindset, like, you can be a lot more productive and get a lot more out of each session at the range.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we definitely push that exact same thing. Actually, I've used that exact same analogy, weirdly, the gym analogy, because that's, anyone that was in the military and actually went to the gym, or even, anyone that takes their physical fitness seriously, you got to have some sort of routine. Otherwise, you're just going to go in there and, like, pick up weird weights and just, like, not actually do anything.
You're just wasting time and money.
But
no purpose.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I guess in conclusion, where can people find you? Where can people find CR2 Shooting Solutions and Chris Roberts?
Yeah, man. So CR2shootingsolutions.com. That's our main website, main landing page. That's where you can find out information about us, and we have links out to everything else. CR2 Supply Cage is where we do all of our retail at. So if you actually want to sign up for a course or buy, optics, ammo, any of that kind of stuff, that's where you would do that at. Obviously, they can go to CR2 Shooting Solutions, and there's links to the Supply Cage. We're on every type of social media that I can think of that I know how to use. So, Facebook, Instagram being the main ones there. We have recently, I'm on Threads and Twitter, and I think I still do have a TikTok, although I'm not regularly on it. There's a LinkedIn out there and all that kind of stuff too. But yeah, just CR2 Shooting Solutions.
Sweet.
Type that into whatever you're on, you're probably going to find us.
Nice.
Yeah, and as always, our listeners know, but I'll link his stuff in the description. So just scroll down and tap your finger on there.
I'll send you our link tree. That's gonna have everything on it.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Do you have anything on YouTube or any plans to do anything on YouTube?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about YouTube, but that's technically social media too. So yeah, I've actually been trying to get more regular on YouTube and doing a little bit more long format stuff on there.
Sweet.
I've put up a couple of reviews lately on YouTube. So, like the Sig Cross PRS rifle review went on there. We did some reviews on laser rangefinding binos recently. I got a video about training mindset on there about the whole gym thing. That was cool. From actually a couple of years ago now. And that's CR2 Shooting Solutions too, I believe. So
nice.
Yep. It all links together. So
sweet.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. Well, huge thanks for coming on. I know it's a big chunk of time to dedicate to sitting down chatting, so we appreciate it. It helps a lot of people out, and it's awesome to get people like yourself out there spreading the wisdom. So I appreciate your willingness to do that and coming on.
Yeah, man. For sure. I appreciate you guys having me.
Yep.
It's always good. It's always good in Steven's face.
Yeah.
Just makes me want to scuff the shit out of him.
Yeah. Start doing push-ups. Yeah, man. Those days are gone.